In 1983, a group of American parents declared war on a cartoon. They called it violent. They called it manipulative. They took it before congressional hearings and demanded it be pulled from the air. The cartoon they wanted to destroy was He-Man. And here is what they never understood. The show they were trying to cancel was already fighting for their children, not with swords, not with strength, with something far more dangerous, with the truth. The story begins not with a hero, not with a sword, not with the most powerful man in the universe. It begins with a number, 65. In 1983, Mattel walked into Filmation Studios and placed that number on the table. 65 episodes, delivered fast enough to air Monday through Friday for 13 consecutive weeks without a single repeat. No major studio had attempted anything like it. Most would have walked away. Filmation said yes, and that decision, made under financial pressure, with no margin for error and no room for failure, set in motion something that no one in that room could have predicted. To fill 65 episodes with something worth watching, they needed writers. Not one or two. A full room, working constantly, under a production schedule that left almost no space to breathe. But Filmation was not a wealthy studio. While every competitor in Hollywood was shipping animation work overseas, to Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Filmation's founder Lou Scheimer had made a choice that cost him enormously. He refused to abandon his American animators. In the middle of an industry-wide crisis, while studios around him gutted their domestic workforce, Scheimer kept every one of his people employed. Through the animators' strike of 1982, through the budget cuts, through the impossible math of producing quality content on a fraction of what the competition was spending. The price of that loyalty was permanent financial pressure, and that pressure produced something extraordinary. With no money for complex animation, Filmation developed techniques that would define the studio's visual identity. Hand-painted backgrounds, so detailed and expensive, they were recycled dozens of times per season. Static shots, where the camera moved but the characters didn't. Dark fantasy landscapes, Gothic castles fused with alien ruins, skies that looked pulled from a science fiction novel of another era. Pause any episode of He-Man. Remove the characters from the frame. What remains are paintings. Actual paintings. The kind that belong in galleries. Filmation was broke and accidentally making art. But here is what no one had calculated. Because the man Scheimer hired to fill 65 episodes had no logical reason to be there at all. While Filmation was building Eternia frame by frame, something was forming outside the studio walls. A movement. In the early 1980s, parent advocacy groups across the United States had identified a new enemy: Saturday morning cartoons. The argument was specific. These shows were nothing more than program-length commercials designed to extract money from children. They were violent. They were irresponsible. They were corrupting. He-Man was among the primary targets. Congressional hearings were held. The Federal Communications Commission was pressured. Groups like Action for Children's Television lobbied aggressively for regulation, for cancellation, for accountability. And they were not entirely wrong about one thing. He-Man was built to sell toys. That was the original transaction. Mattel funded the show because Mattel needed to move product. That part of the accusation was accurate. But the people inside Filmation, the writers, the directors, the producers, had already decided to do something with that platform that Mattel hadn't asked for, and the parent groups hadn't anticipated. They decided to tell the truth. Every episode of He-Man ended with what became known as the moral segment. A character, sometimes He-Man himself, sometimes a supporting cast member, would turn directly to the camera and speak to the child watching, not at them, to them, about fear, about honesty, about asking for help when the weight becomes too heavy, about what it means to feel different from everyone around you and carry that difference alone. The parent groups saw the moral segment as a cynical legal shield, a way for the studio to deflect accusations of irresponsibility. They were half right. It was a legal shield. Lou Scheimer understood that a show with an educational component was harder to cancel, harder to legislate against, harder to pull from the air. And here is the part the pressure groups never managed to see. It was also something else entirely. This is what almost no one knows. Lou Scheimer and his writers began receiving letters, not from critics, not from toy industry executives, not from the parent groups still marching outside congressional buildings demanding the show be canceled, from children. Children who wrote to say that the show's moral segments had reached them somewhere nothing else had reached, that a story about admitting fear or about asking for help when the weight becomes too great had changed the way they saw their own situations. Scheimer documented these accounts in his autobiography. They were letters he kept. One story in particular became well known, that of Josh Johnson, a child who loved He-Man deeply and who received a special message recorded by the show's own voice actors. Years later, he met Scheimer in person during the filming of a documentary. That kind of impact was not in the contract with Mattel. It was not in any production schedule. It was what happened when people with something real to say were handed a platform, even one disguised as a toy commercial, because the show the pressure groups were trying to destroy was quietly and without announcement doing something that no one outside those writers' rooms had planned. That tension between what He-Man appeared to be and what it actually was is the defining architecture of the entire series, and it runs deeper than the letters. It runs all the way to the center of the story itself. Return to Eternia. Prince Adam, privileged, son of a king. By every external measure, a young man who has everything. And by every internal measure, a man who is completely alone. His father, King Randor, believes his son is weak, cowardly, a disappointment wearing a crown. The king does not know, cannot know, that the young man he dismisses every morning is the same warrior who saves Eternia every night. Adam carries that in silence. But here is the distinction that matters. Every major hero of that era carried a secret identity. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. The formula was familiar, almost comfortable by 1983. What Dini and the Filmation writers understood, and what separates He-Man from every other version of that formula, is the specific nature of Adam's burden. Spider-Man is a teenager processing guilt. Batman is a traumatized orphan processing grief. Superman is an alien processing displacement. Adam is a son processing his father's shame. That is not a mythological weight. That is not a cosmic burden. That is Tuesday morning at the breakfast table. That specificity, ordinary, domestic, suffocating, is what made an entire generation of children feel seen by a show their parents were trying to cancel, and the writers knew exactly what they were doing. Now consider the censorship. The rules imposed on He-Man by the broadcast standards of the era were precise and unforgiving. He-Man's sword could not cut anyone. He could not fire a weapon. He could not cause direct physical harm to an opponent. The most powerful man in the universe was not allowed to fight. Other shows of the era found ways around these restrictions. But He-Man, a flesh and blood man defined by physical power, had to find a completely different solution. And what the writers built inside those restrictions is genuinely strange. He-Man solved problems with intelligence. He redirected. He outmaneuvered. He changed the environment rather than attacking the enemy. He talked to Skeletor, actually talked to him, and dismantled the logic of his opponent's position with argument rather than force. The censors believed they were neutering the show. What they actually did was create the most pacifist action hero in the history of American animation. The censors handed the writers a constraint. The writers turned it into a philosophy. Filmation closed in 1988, and almost everything they built disappeared with it. For 40 years, the verdict on He-Man was delivered by people who never looked past the surface. They saw the recycled animation, the toy tie-in, the pink vest. They didn't see the letters Scheimer kept in his office. They didn't see the writers building the architecture of secret identity with more precision and more emotional honesty than most prestige television manages today. They didn't see the philosophers operating inside a system designed to prevent philosophy. The most powerful man in the universe was hiding in plain sight, just like his alter ego. So here is the question worth sitting with. If a show this deliberately, this carefully built, was dismissed for 40 years as a toy commercial, what else have we been wrong about? Leave your answer below. And if you want to go deeper, the comics took everything the cartoon could only suggest and pushed it somewhere much darker. That story is next.